regular board meeting. We'll start with roll call.
Amy Riddle Swanson.
Here.
Abe Smith.
Here.
Dominique Stewart.
Here.
Rachel Henderson.
Here.
Dale Dahlke.
Here.
Amber Kirsting.
Here.
Emily Hines.
Here.
Michelle Dupree.
Here.
Angela Wolf.
Here. We have a forum. Let's stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
And our mission statement. The school district of the Menomonie area, by embracing the unique needs and using the strengths of our diverse community, is dedicated to preparing all students to become lifelong learners, caring individuals, and responsible citizens. Do we have any proposed changes to the agenda order tonight? We have one commendation this evening. The board's going to recognize Officer Jeff Small for his outstanding service as a school resource officer. I'm going to sit here and read this with the microphone, and then you come up and I'll give you the certificate. Okay. It is with respect and appreciation that we recognize Officer Small for his dedication and commitment to the students, staff, and families of SDMA. Officer Small goes beyond the traditional responsibilities of a school resource officer. His presence brings us not only safety and security, but also works to build relationships with students and staff. Officer Small is a great listener and shows up consistently in ways that matter. Specifically, officers had regular lunches with a student and then took that student fishing on the last day of school. His ability to connect authentically with kids is truly making a difference for the SDMA. For these efforts, we proudly commend Officer Small for his work as a school resource officer. Our school is a better, safer, and more compassionate place because of him.
Thank you very much. I just want to say to Principal Drow, thank you very much. Everything that we do as school resource officers and as investigators, we certainly don't do it for the attention or the recognition, but it is very nice to be recognized. It means a lot to me, so thank you all very much.
Thank you very much for your work, and thanks to you and your family for being here tonight.
Thank you.
All right, next up, we have our October highlight on youth.
Thanks, Rachel. And Officer Small and family, don't feel like you have to stay for the whole meeting. You are welcome to, but don't feel like you have to.
It's a Brewer game at 7.
Don't we know? Okay, so for the October highlight on youth, I'm going to try to spare the high school students and not take their thunder about homecoming. The only thing I want to mention is it was a great homecoming, and I would like to also recognize the pep band. They had an awesome outdoor concert last Monday. I know, Dale, you had an opportunity to go, and I might have missed, there was a lot of people, so I might have missed some of the other people that were there. But Mr. Karkula and the band students did a remarkable job. They went right through, boy, it must have been about 15, Brian was there, he's shaking his head. Must have went through about 15 different songs, and it was just a perfect night. I told Mr. Karkula he's in charge of district weather from now on. But so many great things going on at the school, and kudos to everyone for a great homecoming week. At the middle school, a couple things to point out. One is the Multicultural Club. They participated in the homecoming parade, which was a real nice activity. You can see some pictures, and this is all available on the public site of Board Docs. And then also our 8th grade students collected data as part of the Jared Creek watershed study. And our middle school students have done that now for, I think, over a decade. And Miss Scott, Rachel Scott, our teacher over there, every year she brings a group of students to Rotary, and they present about their study, and it's part of the watershed conference that they participate in. It's a great learning activity, and also provides some very interesting data about the watershed. Knapp Elementary School also had a picture from the homecoming parade. They had a real nice contingent that was in the parade. And then also they have some pictures from their recent trip to the environmental site. And it's always great to see students and staff using the environmental site for educational and fun activities. Oak Lawn Elementary School, it's all about food at Oak Lawn, and Mrs. Drought maybe stepped out. But you can see that students in Miss Prince's class had a cooking project, yummy veggie pizza. Students also enjoyed eating local food during lunch on September 22nd that featured local veggies in the soup and local cheese that was on the toasted cheese. And first grade made applesauce and had baby quail come for a visit. So a lot of great stuff at Oak Lawn. River Heights Elementary School, talk about the Packers and Go Pack Go. They had Green Bay Packers alumni come to the school and help them as part of their playground project and the newest playground addition that they have at River Heights. And there will be accommodation at the next school board meeting related to that as well. They also had the Menomonie firefighters there for Fire Safety Week and a visit from Tractor Central. And I can just imagine as a young 4-year-old kindergarten student how cool that would be. Heck, I would enjoy it, being able to see one of those big tractors. So very cool. And then at Wakanda Elementary School, just some neat pictures of students. And I like how Mrs. Schofield put this. Throughout the school halls, you'll find learners gathered together, collaborating and engaging in meaningful work. And there's some other neat things about some of the stuff the students are doing, along with an LMC project with a salt dome map of the United States. So great things happening in our schools. It's been another great month, and thank you.
Thank you for that. Next up, we have our student representative communications. Thanks for being here tonight.
Good evening, members of the school board. We are excited to share the recent activities happening in our school.
This year's Nom Through the Lens Homecoming was a success. Student Council sponsored their annual Homecoming Week, where students dressed up, competed in wall decorations, skits, and floats, and got the chance to earn money for their class. We had a lot of participation this year, but the seniors showed the most school spirit and came out on top. They won 3 out of 4 of the dress-up days, the wall decoration, and the skit. Winning the wall decoration this year gave the class of 2026 a 4-year sweep of the wall decoration contest.
On Friday of Homecoming Week, MHS had the coronation assembly. Our Grand Marshal, Miss Martha Peabody, was recognized for her outstanding dedication. The class of 2026 voted on Homecoming King and Queen, which was also announced at the assembly. Congrats to King Harrison Davis and Queen Aubrey Schluter. All fall sports captains were recognized, as well as senior athletes. The assembly also included performances by the MHS concert choir and the MHS cheer team.
After the assembly, the homecoming parade started at 4 p.m. There were 53 entries in the lineup, and we saw some amazing creativity from everyone who participated. After the parade, the Menomonie Mustangs had the football game against Eau Claire Memorial. King Harrison Davis brought the game ball out on the field, and the MHS concert chorus performed the national anthem. The Mustangs had a big homecoming victory with a final score of 42-7.
At halftime during the game, the MHS cheer team performed their cheer routine. Additionally, the 2025 homecoming court was recognized along with their parents. Court included Kaya Barnhart, Paula Flores, Taya Johnson, Sarah Palmer, Aubrey Schluter, Harrison Davis, Max Erickson, Gabe Henderson, Cade Lamb, and Bryce Shepard. MHS also honored 7 new members of its Athletic Hall of Fame during halftime and a formal induction ceremony on September 27th. The new members included Ben Walter, Angie Wilson, Ben Dahlke, Joe Labuda, Nicole Schmidt, the 1993 state championship football team, and Steve Schranz. We finished up homecoming week with our homecoming dance at MHS.
On Thursday, September 18th, HOSA hosted a simulation for junior and senior study halls. The simulation was referred to as the mock trauma, and it is put on in coordination with Mayo Clinic, HOSA, Olson and Rao Funeral Homes, and Menomonie Fire and PD, along with many other community partners, to show students the dangers and potentially deadly consequences of drinking and driving. Mock Trauma was an impactful event that presents students with a simulated car crash scene. Students saw their peers, emergency personnel, and others reenact the scene that would unfold after a wreck as a result of driving under the influence of alcohol. Following the simulation, the students were brought into the auditorium and heard from some guest speakers, including Officer Call, Stephen McWithy, Teresa Pesa, and Katie Wittig.
The Plant and Land Management class attended the Pierce County Land Evaluation Contest on Wednesday, October 8th in Maiden Rock, Wisconsin. 7 area schools competed against each other by analyzing land and soil properties. Following the contest, students enjoyed a business and industry tour of Black Valley Ag in Durand. The students learned about fertilizers and agriculture careers. 12 students of the Menomonie FFA will be traveling to the National FFA Convention at the end of the month. The National Convention and Expo is located in Indianapolis, Indiana. The students will hear from the National FFA officers, guest speakers, and visit with agricultural businesses and colleges from across the nation. This convention is the largest youth convention in the world, with attendance of FFA members reaching over 72,000 students.
Region 1 of WASC is planning an impact project that includes collecting socks for those in need before winter. The sock drive is called Socktober and will take place from October 20th to 28th, with study halls at MHS competing to collect the most socks.
In the first week of October, over 50 students attended Build My Future at the St. Croix County Fairgrounds, where they participated in hands-on activities like driving skid steers, making birdhouses, and drilling through concrete. Another group of 15 students interested in industrial mechanics participated in ConAgra Manufacturing Day with plant facts and historical insights, plant tour, and a Q&A session.
MHS Environmental Biology and Science in the Community students worked in cooperation with the LCIP, UW-STEL, and the City of Menomonie to remove invasive buckthorn from campus woods along 5th Street and towards the river. The project is in the early stages and is a huge success.
That is all we have for today. Thank you for having us.
Thank you so much for being here and for all of that great update. It's really wonderful every month to hear from you and to learn about all the great things going on at MHS. Thanks for being here. Next up, we have community communications. It looks like we have 2 speakers tonight. First up is Josie Philbin.
Hi, my name is Josie Philbin, and I'm from NAP, which is part of the Menomonie School District. Dr. Zadowski and members of the board. Catherine Burwell-Singh is Britain's strictest headmistress. She is the head of Michaela Community School in inner city London. That school receives diverse students and they get along. It crosses many racial and religious divides. Many of the children don't even want to be there. But the school receives high test scores and outstanding ratings in standards of education as well as character. Visitors report that the children are happy, they get along well, they are learning loads, and their self-esteem is through the roof. How is this done? Burwell-Singh was asked. Number 1, discipline. They are strict on the tiniest things. If you take care of the pennies, the dollars will take care of themselves. Dress neatly, shirts tucked in, modest attire, neatly groomed, no desecrating of the body with piercings or tattoos, always arrive on time, turn up with homework done, quiet corridors, respect for authority, and everyone has the same standards. Number 2, traditional teaching methods. Teachers at the front of the classroom, adults are in charge. Desks in rows facing the teacher who is in charge, not in groups or circles with the children facing their peers. These days, parents and teachers want to be best buddies with the children. They want the children to lead the learning instead of the teacher leading. Classroom must be well managed, not chaotic. Learning happens best in a disciplined, quiet classroom where the students can focus well on what is being taught. Every minute where learning can take place counts to get the most out of your school day. Number 3, curriculum. It is traditional English, math, geography, science, British, I say American, patriotism. Avoid the more modern subjects. Teach courses like what was taught in the 1950s. Number 4, old-fashioned values. Kindness, gratitude, decency, respect for authority, personal responsibility, self-sacrifice for the betterment of the whole community. To instill gratitude, every lunch hour, children are taught to stand up and share something they are thankful for. This enhances public speaking as well as thankfulness. If a child drops a plate of food in most places in our schools, the peers twitter and mock and humiliate the child. At Michaela, the children are taught to run to help him. They are on his side. This develops a habit of kindness and a culture of kindness. Can we integrate some of these ideas into our schools? Since children are the hope of our community, this kind of learning would lead out into the Menomonie community. Our graduates would be well-rounded, educated community members with strong character and habits of kindness to teach us all. So this information is sourced from a podcast called The World and Everything in It, and you would just Google or search, I guess, Britain's strictest headmaster. Thank you.
And our second speaker tonight is Mike Cooper.
Good evening, Michael from Menomonie. Good evening and good news for parents, students, admin, faculty, and staff. The title from the article that I'm going to read from is from WorldNet Daily. The article is titled and reads as follows. Judge makes significant ruling for schools on children's books promoting same-sex marriage. A school board does have the authority and can remove from its school library shelves a book intended for children that promote same-sex marriage according to the judge's ruling. By definition, libraries must have discretion to keep certain ideas and viewpoints off the shelves, explained Chief U.S. District Judge Alan Windsor in the fight involving Escambia County School Board in Florida. In exercising that discretion, this library did what libraries have been doing for 2 centuries, and that is decide which books are of requisite and appropriate quality to be on the shelves, the judge wrote. That issue was a penguin-themed children's book depicting same-sex marriage. And Tangle Makes 3, a story about 2 male penguins that would adopt, hatch, and raise Tangle, a penguin chick at New York Central Park Liberty Council, New York Central Park Zoo. The fight moved into courts in 2023 on a lawsuit by the book's author and a young female student. Judge Windsor's conclusion was that the government does not create a forum for others' speech by purchasing books for a public library. The result of the ruling is that books authors have no First Amendment right to a spot on a government library shelf, and the student has no First Amendment right to receive the author's specific message through the library. Judge Windsor explained the library's decision to remove the book does not keep the book or its viewpoint from the student since the book is available elsewhere. Furthermore, Judge Windsor noted the authors also do not have a First Amendment right to demand that the library ignore the book's viewpoint when deciding whether to include it in the collection. Windsor's ruling found a library collection does not constitute a public forum for private expression, so libraries can make its own determinations on what constitutes worthwhile literature. Liberty Council founder Matt Staver said, school boards have the discretion to keep inappropriate material off the bookshelves and away from children. This is a abbreviated copy of that article.
Thank you. Next up, we have revenue and expenditure reports for both the months of June 2025 and September 2025.
All right, so we'll start off with the June reports. These show year-end amounts for the last fiscal year, so it's just really just a wrap-up of how things finished up as of June 30th. If you look at the revenue report, you see that we brought in a bit more than we had budgeted for the year, which is always good to see. On the expense side, looking at the report by object, there's nothing really unusual or concerning. The only item that might catch your eye is the inter-fund transfer line. So that ties to the transfer of Fund 46 that was approved a few months ago, I believe it was July. And that transfer was made, so it will, but the budget was not revised, so it will show up as an adjustment later on in the meeting. I have a budget adjustment that's for that. The expense report by function tells a similar story, everything in line except for the Fund 46 transfer. Again, I'll be presenting that in the budget revisions later tonight, so you see those adjustments reflected there. So really the June reports are a snapshot of how we closed the year, a little stronger revenue, expenses were on track, and one pending adjustment that will be presented later tonight. Any questions before I move on to September? Okay, So starting with the September revenue report, not much movement, which again is completely normal for this time of year. The main area where I saw the most percentage increase is in admissions with fall sports and activities underway. Those revenues start coming in. With the expense report by object, you'll notice that apparel has crept up a bit. Most of that is tied to Fund 21 activity. So in the budget, the original budget that I'll present next time, I will change that to better reflect what we're seeing in those expenses. On the expense report by function, again, nothing out of the ordinary. Looking back to last year, everything looks pretty much expected at this point for the fiscal year. Any questions on the September reports?
Any questions or discussion on any of the revenue and expense reports? Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Next up, we have our monthly employment report. This is an informational report. Does anyone have any questions or discussion on the monthly employment report? All right, seeing none. Moving on to the consent agenda. I'll entertain a motion to approve the consent agenda.
So moved.
Second, Hines.
Tonight on the consent agenda, we have minutes from our regular board meeting of September 8th and our special board meeting of September 22nd. We have general fund checks totaling $1,771,070.19 and cash receipts totaling $145,275.66. We had few donations exceeding $1,000, including $1,000 in district sponsorships contributed by various community members and local businesses in support of MHS programs. $1,500. The vote box popped up and I can't read it anymore. $1,500 from the NAP PTO to support the book giveaway initiatives, and $1,920 from Everwood Farmstead to the Oak Lawn Music Department. We also have safety drills at Wakanda, in addition to our vendor check history and rolling averages. Any questions or discussion on the consent agenda? All right, seeing none, let's vote.
Could you put that up again, because I
Yeah.
missed it when it came
It
up,
should
because I
just-
was reading the,
It just popped up again.
okay, thank you,
Yeah.
sorry.
I mean, I was gonna vote yes, I haven't voted.
She's so
That's
efficient.
great. Thank you, Debbie. Motion passes unanimously. And we have no content in our personnel consent agenda tonight and no action agenda items. So we shall launch directly into our discussion agenda. First up, we have a presentation of our 2025 school perception staff survey. And we have our consultant here to give us a rundown.
Sure, I'll just do a quick introduction. Welcome to Darren Sievers, our consultant from School Perceptions. Darren has been working with us now for the past 3 years at least. Darren is a longtime educator in the state of Wisconsin. Was it 27 years? 27 years in the Slingers School District. And Darren can give you a little bit more, but School Perceptions has been great to work with. They work with districts all across the country, and Darren did a really nice job sharing our survey results with the staff this morning. He stayed in Menomonie all day, went to the Acoustic Cafe for lunch, and now he's here to present to the board. So Darren, welcome. Go ahead and take it away.
Yeah, thanks for having me, and I want to thank Joe and his team for the hospitality today, because it worked out really well to present this morning. And I went in the back room and worked, and then stayed in town today. And I don't know if you know this, but I studied here for 2 years. I got my master's in school counseling, and that was how I made my foray into education. Ended up getting hired by Slinger School District, stayed there for 27 years, and then my last 9 years were as superintendent. And that's how I learned about school perceptions, because we use them for a $43 million remodel of our 5 schools. Performing Arts Center, new gyms, and we also did the staff and parent surveys that we're going to talk about today with your staff report. So it's neat to be in front of your staff today, and I've got to tell you, what a great group. Everyone was there early, they're all eager to get the day started. Joe kicked it off, and the hospitality and energy in the district was contagious. So it's fun to wrap it up with you and tell you what we learned through our survey tool. I do want to say before I show you the data though that honestly the way that you as a district are using this tool and responding to the data is the role model. You are checking in with your folks, then you step away, make focused improvements, and then you come back to them and check in and see how those improvement goals have moved the needle, what progress you've made, what other areas are requiring attention, because you don't just launch a survey to look for improvement ideas, you also look to protect and maintain those things that are going well. And so I just have to say the way working with Joe and his team that you're using the data at the building level and at the district level is really a model for other districts in Minnesota and Wisconsin that I serve. So with that being said, here's your report. So the flow of the presentation tonight, I'm going to remind you briefly, for those in the audience, about our background as a company. In my 4th year, in fact, my first presentation ever with the company was here, October of 2022, with Joe, the report that we're going to contrast with this year's findings. Then we'll get right into your data, talk about the results, our analysis of the results, and then I'll take any questions that the 9 board members have for me today. Okay. So a little about us. We've been doing this for 23 years. We've conducted now over 3 million staff, parent, student, and community surveys for school improvement in all 50 states. And we've worked with over 1,300 districts on referendum planning, strategic planning. Projects going up and down Highway 94 right now as we speak. We just launched a survey in Altoona where they're looking at some facility needs. And Frederick is doing some strategic planning in this region. I'll be around here a lot this fall. So let's talk about your data. We had the survey deadline of September 8th. You had 268 respondents. I teased your staff this morning a little bit about the fact that how consistent they are. You had 269 staff take the survey back in 2022, the fall of 2022. So we were trying to figure out who one person is that didn't take it this go around. So 60. All right. 60% participation rate, and if you're wondering, is that good, is that bad? That's exactly our company average. Sometimes we see 40%, but we've had as high, the company record is 94%. So that's very solid, really reliable more than anything. To get 60%, that means that we've got a lot of opinions measured from a lot of different work areas, okay? So, I don't know what happened to my slide. This is part of a Google app?
Yeah.
Okay, sometimes Google messes with the formatting of PowerPoint, so what I'll just show you here is this is the distribution of the data by site. All right, so we can study individual building locations. Joe has that report. He has a report that shows all the individual building results, and I know he's got a plan to meet with building leaders about their individual building findings. All right, so. Okay.
Sorry about that.
No, don't worry about it. Yeah, sometimes Microsoft and Google don't talk to each other very nicely, but as I'm looking at the slide on the left up here, the different areas of the pie chart, you had 39% of your survey respondents were teachers, 18% ed specialists, that's like psychs, counselors, speech language pathologists, paraprofessionals were 15%, support staff were 14%, 5% administration. Why is that important? We run a very, very anonymous process. I told the staff this morning, there's only one member of our team in the company, our head programmer, that can trace results to a person. But what we like to do is study the results by position. Even though it's anonymous, Joe has the capability to look at how do classroom teachers feel about this question as compared to support staff as opposed to administration. That was a gift to me in Slinger because I figured out overall, we were doing pretty well, but our paraprofessionals were not very happy with certain aspects of their employment. So I was very focused that next year on addressing their concerns as paraprofessionals. You can also study your results by years of service, which is kind of neat. Particularly, I was telling the group this morning, my first day on the job in Slinger was the first day of Act 10. And so I was very intentional at looking at how our post-Act 10 hires were feeling compared to our pre-Act 10 hires, trying to be sensitive to all the sweeping changes that we're implementing, because that was a big deal. I had brown hair before Act 10, and now
At least you still have some.
fair. All right, so now let's talk about your results for the 25-26 school year. I'll remind the board, because I do not expect you to remember this, we use a Likert scale of 1 to 5 points. 5 being the goal, strongly agree. 4 points for agreement, disagree is 2, and strongly disagree is 1. Can any board member tell me what is missing?
3.
Yeah, there's no 3. There's no 3 because if they don't know, or it doesn't apply to them, or they're not sure, they can click that, but it hasn't any point value because it's not telling us anything. We want to measure leanings. Either you are agreeing with the question we're asking, or you're strongly agreeing, or you're disagreeing or strongly agreeing. If it doesn't apply to them, they can choose that, but then we just pull that out because it's not really telling Joe and his leadership team anything. So the true median is a 3. And we want as many of the Menomonie scores as possible to be north of 3 as possible. You know, it's exciting. The next slide is going to be a lot, but I'll walk you through it because here's your, what we call your executive summary. Every question on the survey feeds into one of 5 areas. So this is kind of just your overarching view, but we're going to go question by question quite efficiently. I know the Brewers are playing, and so I'm not going to monopolize your time, but this is got some great data to share. We'll move through the questions efficiently, but every question feeds into one of 5 areas: academics, engagement, support, the student's experience through the eyes of the staff, and then ultimately the staff experience through their own eyes. So the first column, it's a little washed out, but the first column is your current score. That's your score this year. The next column is your score fall of 2022. The third column is your percentage change. Notice all 5 grew and grew significantly. We get excited as a company when we see 3 to 4% change. All of yours are 3% or more in improvement. Then the fourth column, I don't know that you've seen this before, that's your percentile rank. Okay, so that tells you when you get the big report about how the state report cards, state test results, that's how you compare to other districts that are trying to achieve the same outcome as you. So for academics, 77, that means you're better than 77% of other districts that were asked that same set of questions about the academic experience in Menomonie. So the other way of looking at it, top 23%. And we as a company get super excited statistically. Anything 75th percentile or above is tremendous. We also get worried when it's 25th percentile or lower. Okay? So does that set of data make sense? Because that's how I'm going to report every question. So this year's score last time, 3 years ago, percentage change, and then where your percentile rank is. Any questions? Now we'll be very, very efficient. Again, reminder of the Likert scale. And we'll go through the workday questions. They are ranked by highest percentage change to lowest. That's how these are scored, okay, or ranked and organized. So you'll notice I have the technology I need to do my job well. Your staff absolutely feels like they have the devices to do their job well compared to 2022. 8% change has you at the 32nd percentile. Now, before I talk too much about those percentile ranks, I want to tell you a little bit of something because I did not tell the staff this, and I should have. When you gave the survey in fall of 2022, our pool of districts was roughly 50, 45, 50. This is the fastest growing product in our company. Now your comparison pool is 150 districts. So your pool is much bigger. All kinds of districts trying to be good with their staff, retain their people. So it's a much deeper pool, but also our server has a cutoff. It only looks back 2 years. We don't want to look back at data pre-Act 10. We don't want to look at data in 2021. We want to look at the last 2 years. So everything I tell you today is compared to other districts who are also trying to chase improvements and trying to get better. So your target has kind of moved since fall of 2022. 100 extra districts, and all districts trying to do better stuff to retain their employees too. So when I show you some of these percentile ranks, it gets really good tonight. I'm excited for you to see this. So let's talk through this. The amount of work I'm asked to do is reasonable, manageable, improved the last 3 years by 6.3%, has hit the 40th percentile, right in the average range. Now, we talked about this with the staff. I have access to the technology support I need at the 14th percentile. It's improved, but compared to other districts, you're down in that range where, okay, we gotta have a discussion about what's going on here because you're in that lowest 25%, okay? And Joe has a plan, so your leadership team's already working on this. I feel safe at work. Safety's a big deal. See the score rose by 3.7%, you're at the 46th percentile. I feel comfortable sharing input, concerns with my supervisor administrator. See the scores, nice improvement, 51st percentile. Most days I look forward to going to work at 55th percentile. I have the materials and supplies I need to do my job well, 37th percentile. And then finally, in the workday questions, I have healthy working relationships with my coworkers, right at the 50th percentile, right in the squarely in the average range. Now, environment scores, some pretty exciting things here. All staff handle student discipline in a consistent manner. 5.4% improvement, top 22%. All students in our school are respected for their values and beliefs. Nice surge, 83rd percentile. Our school student discipline practices policies being effective. Again, nice improvement, has hit the 71st percentile. Now let's talk about those three. Discipline, on almost every staff report I give, lowest 2 scores. Because everyone is struggling with behaviors, managing behaviors, making sure kids are respected. Not in Menomonie. It's 2 of your stronger areas. And talk about a barrier. We do a lot of surveying of students, and almost always in the student survey is, if the staff could just get those other kids to behave, then maybe I could learn. Your staff are really feeling good about what policies, practices are in place, and their own ability to consistently apply those. Those are scores that most districts would pay money to have, okay? Staff input is valued. We know it is because I work with the guy who's asking me to gather input from them, and this is just one means. There's lots of ways to get staff input, but we process it with the staff today to kick off the day. Our staff does a good job educating our students. Nice growth, 78th percentile. And please don't assume that every school district thinks that they're all doing a great job. I've given many a report where they're maybe the 19th percentile because they don't respect the job their peers are doing. In an anonymous survey, they'll be honest with us. Okay. In the last year, I've received useful feedback to help improve my work. How are they feeling about their evaluations, that formal, informal walkthroughs, anecdotal notes? Feeling is useful. Information important to my work is shared with me in a timely and effective manner. 79th percentile. And then, only question that regressed from 3 years ago is I have opportunities for training and professional development to help improve my work. And with that regression, it does have you at the 6th percentile on that singular question. Finally, the support section of the survey. I'm going to point out that we as a company get really excited, and our reports are actually color-coded, that if there's an improvement of 10% or more, bells and whistles go off and it turns green. Or if it regresses by 10 or more, it turns red using the stoplight model. You're going to have a whole lot of green lights here. Because look at this. Social and emotional needs of all students are met. It grew by 21.5%. I've been doing this for almost 4 years now, and I've rarely given a report where something improves by 20%. Okay? School board doing what it takes to make our district successful. Another area that would have turned green on my Excel spreadsheet that I gave to Joe. 13.5%, and you're in the top 23% as far as how your staff sees you as a group of leaders. Our school has a process to ensure every student has a connection with at least one adult. Top 9% after a 13% surge. And the former counselor me, this is one of my pet questions. As long as each student has just somebody they can go to in that school, right? The district heading in the right direction. 76th percentile after 13% surge. District administration doing what it takes to make our district successful. 12.9% growth to the 61st percentile. And I have to tell you, those three are oftentimes aligned. The district direction, the school board, and district administration, they go hand in hand. And I've had to get some pretty yucky reports this last 18 months because of misalignment between the board administration, and thus the district direction score is not good. So you've got a good thing going in Menomonie. The district seeks input from a broad group of staff members. Well, I know there's lots of ways for Joe and his administration to do that, but this survey tool is one of them. Every person that gets paid by this district was given the opportunity to take the survey. I'm recognized when I do a good job. 9% growth has hit the 45th percentile. Our school supports students from diverse backgrounds, more diverse student populations than ever before, in the top 10%. And then finally, the last set of questions, I feel supported by my supervisor administrator when I make a decision. Great growth, once again, 60th percentile. All students in our school are given equal opportunities to learn and experience success. A real challenge for a lot of systems that we consult with, but you're in the top 26%. The district's pay practices are fair. Very challenging topic across the nation. 53rd percentile after a nice surge. I have training and support to work with students with different backgrounds. This training question scored obviously much better than the other professional development question. And then our parents and community support the district. It did improve, but it has hit the 32nd percentile. So as we wrap up the survey, we do break out those equal opportunity question by different groups. And I have to tell you how nice these results are too, whether it's cultural backgrounds, gender, racial backgrounds, students with special needs, or their economic background. You've grown in all 5 areas and are scoring at the average or highly above average in all 5 of them, as far as making sure every student has the opportunity to learn and access your programs. So our closing question, and you'll all recognize this from our community surveys, on a scale of 0 to 10, we word this question: we recommend the district as a place of employment. Your score 3 years ago was a 6.69. This year, a 7.15. Percentage change of 6.9 compared to all the other districts. So we've asked this question on every survey we've given, so it's thousands and thousands of them in Wisconsin alone. Comparison was averages 6.98. You see why we don't allow the 3 on the other questions, because one of the highest scoring areas was the neutral of 5. But what my boss has kind of trained me to look for, the guy that started this company back in 2002, he said, let's always at this report, let's look at the bottom and see if there's anybody, he says, anybody has a B in their bonnet about anything. Well, 0s and 1s, you have no people that scored you at a 0 or a 1 on the staff. But then we also look as a company at the 9s and 10s. We have a full-time PhD research guy on our team, and he studied the 8, 9, and 10 trends. Those people don't just express happiness about the district, they tell everybody how much they like working for you. And you got 40% of your staff, more than 40% of your staff up in the 8, 9, and 10 category. So high satisfaction in Menomonie. If anything, it's only hurt because we had 19% that jumped on that 5 because we allowed them 2 on this one question. Okay, so let's summarize. We do a top 5, bottom 5 practice at the end of this. So what are our takeaways? Let's look at the top 5 as far as most improvement by percentage change. Well, meeting students' needs, big deal. Connecting them with people, meeting their emotional needs, but also the school board, the district direction, and district administration. So kids and district leadership were the focus of your improvement efforts, it would appear, through the data. Or that this just happened these last 3 years. Either way, celebratory. The 5 that improved the least, typically I'll have 5 that move backwards into the negatives here. Menomonie only have 1 that moved backwards. The others just didn't improve as much as some of the others that we tested. Okay? looks like they just need a bit more support when it comes to technology and materials and supplies, things of that nature. And that theme holds true when we take the next step, and that's talk about the 5 highest by process by percentile rank. These are the 5 when compared to other districts scored the highest. And again, lots of student-centered things, making sure there's equal opportunities for kids, communication, respect, making sure kids are respectful of each other and respected for their values and beliefs. There's a mental health crisis every project, whether it's Arizona, Virginia, Dallas, New York City, or all the districts that we serve in Minnesota, Wisconsin, mental health is an issue. And your social and emotional scores, particularly worthy of note. And then finally, the 5 with the lowest comparison scores compared to other districts. This is where the PD question that you saw earlier, the technology and some pieces there. Typically, we see a parent and community score in that range, that lower average range, when there's been a referendum that has failed. And I know that's kind of a bit of how the staff come away to feel supported. Well, and we just did that project a couple of years ago, and we know how that turned out. But I also know that this community loves their schools, and I know the staff recognize that. So that's a lot of data in a short amount of time. Kind of fired all it was drinking, but it was also good. I wanted you to see every question. Okay. Any questions for me?
You mentioned that the percentiles are based on 2 years of data, is that right?
Yeah, our server always looks back just 2 years.
One thing I'm obviously the thing to reflect the most on is, not the most, but one thing to reflect on is the PD question, right? One thing that strikes me is that we just came off of a year where all of the PD was dedicated to Act 20, essentially, right? I mean, people were locked into an Act 20 training program that took up a lot of the traditional PD. And
You and everyone else in Wisconsin.
Yeah, so I'm curious if, do you know if there has been a 1-year downward trend or not across that 2 years? Because I'd be surprised if,
I've noticed professional development in Minnesota and Wisconsin have taken its hits because Minnesota has something going on just like that. I came from Lake City today. That's where my mom is, and so I have an office there so I can serve the state of Minnesota too. And they've had a reading initiative that was launched as well. Some of the training has definitely taken
and not to say, and not to imply that training is not deeply important, but that I think that a lot of the satisfaction with PD comes from when people kind of explore their own interests in a self-motivated way more. And if it's more regimented or built out, I wonder if that could lead to decreased interest.
And you asked a good question that we could probably solve down the line. Something we've done as a company. I think Joe's on a nice cycle here of every 3 years, but we do have something new that we've developed called a kind of a dipstick survey, kind of like checking your oil, where if there's questions you want to check in more frequently than doing a whole survey, we could check in 3 months, 6 months, 9 months, whenever you want, to check back with people and have we moved the needle on just these 5 questions since the last time we asked you that. So Abe, if you're wondering if that was isolated, there's a very economical and quick way to take the temperature on that down the line. So I'll just say that. Yeah.
Related to that, am I remembering correctly, Brian, didn't you do a specific staff professional development survey?
Yeah.
Hallucinating? Okay.
Yeah, so we do on an alternating cycle, we do a PD needs assessment survey, which is somewhat more comprehensive, and then following our beginning of the school year and traditionally our mid-year PD, when they're more full-day professional developments, we do a quick survey afterwards as well to gain some input.
Great, thank you.
I'm just curious how many districts actually utilize the student survey perceptions? I'm just curious how it would relate to what
Yeah, so I would tell you it's probably about 30% less than take the staff. And the parent, probably another 10% less than the staff. So I would say our most popular product right now, we're kind of known as the referendum company. That's not the case anymore. We're known as just as much the staff engagement company. Slightly lesser extent, the parent check-in company, but what's really surging right now is that check-in with the students. And here's why. Bill and our team are very intentional. Everyone has worked in a school before, and it's not this intense, controversial mental health check survey. It's just a good check-in with kids about everything. We ask the question, do you have someone to sit with at lunch? And the counselors, there's an anonymous approach we can take where they can see a list of kids that don't have someone to sit with at lunch. Something as mundane as that, but that gets them nervous every morning to school. No one has to sit in the corner. It would drive me crazy when I was dean of students, see Susie over there in the corner with nobody to sit with, right? It's just simple things like that. So it's a nice, safe survey, 30 questions. But some districts like Arizona, they weren't allowed to survey their students. State law just changed it this summer, so now we're going to launch that for a district in Arizona too. But it's not as popular as staff because everyone has a staffing crisis, and everyone knows that they've got to stay engaged with their parents. But ooh, is that student survey really growing? I just did a report the other day at 113 districts compared to the report I was giving, so it's not far behind that staff survey anymore. Yeah, you bet.
I was going to ask it, I'm not, I was going to bounce off it, I was going to ask you, is there, well, I don't doubt that Act 20 had something to do with all of the professional development. It was very intense. I don't doubt that had some impact. I'm wondering is there a way to pull that data apart so we can see the K-3
You bet.
compared to the 4 through 12?
We can break it out by building. Any of those identifiers I told you about, we can break it out by classroom teacher as opposed to specialists, by building. Any of those factors, we can sort it by those. But professional development is a challenge for every district because you're trying to find something that everyone needs, but there's certain just have to adopt these statewide initiatives that are challenging, for sure.
I was curious if our QIC, our Quality Improvement Committee, is like scheduled to discuss professional development at some point in the calendar year, and if that could, if like more broken out analysis could be provided for members at that point.
Yeah, I think that's a good idea, and I will say professional development is on every QIC agenda, although I will say it probably hasn't received as much attention as some of the other agenda items. But what I'd like to say is that, let me come back to the PD piece in just one second. Just a few takeaways. First of all, the results are amazing. The fact that we only had one question, excuse me, too much yelling at the Brewer game, at the TV. The fact that only one question went down is remarkable. With that being said, we know there's more work to do. There's always more work to do. And this really helps us inform our work. One of the things I'm most pleased with is that when we look at these results and then compare them to this year's district work plan, it's very well aligned. When we started talking about this with the administrative team, and we talked about, all right, so this is the information, what are we going to do with it? And we started talking about action plans and goals. So much of it is already reflected in this year's work plan that it's just, do what we said we're going to do. Now, I'm not going to say that this didn't help inform other ways. For instance, with professional development, Rachel's question is great about the QIC group. And what we've already done is we had a QIC meeting last week. Typically, Brian does not sit on the QIC meetings. We do talk about professional development, but then if there's questions or concerns, those are relayed to Brian's. In last week's meeting, Brian was there. And I think that's something that we're going to continue, and I appreciate Brian, wanting to do that. So yes, I think addressing the PD that way. Also, we don't want to explain away any of these results. At the same time, it is helpful to try to figure out what might have led to them. Kind of like Abe's question with the Act 20, and that's something we discussed. Also, we discussed this year's opening keynote speaker. Did a fine job, definitely not as powerful and as light as some of the speakers we've had in the past. This survey went out in conjunction with that opening day PD. Again, some people liked them, but in terms of the whole staff, it wasn't as well received as some of the other ones we've had. I think that has something to do with it. The technology, we talked about that. We had a hodgepodge of classroom displays, smart boards and such, all across the district. you know that one of our priorities was making sure that we had a board in every classroom, and now we have uniform technology displays in each classroom. But with that, there's a pretty high learning curve, and we also found out through the survey that some of our staff members, particularly our paraeducators, felt like they had not had the training that was needed. Hence, we think that definitely added to the score. So how did we respond? Today was a professional development day, and in addition to Darren sharing the survey results, Katie and her team did an awesome professional development for the boards. There were 2 different boards because there's 2 different models depending which school you're at, and her team put on a professional development. It was very well attended, primarily by paraeducators, but also some teachers that wanted to learn more. So we are already using this survey data to make ourselves better. And then last thing, I just wanted to point out that, and we did this before, I think this is the 3rd time now we've done the survey since I've been here. What I will do then, we have our leadership meeting tomorrow, that's the whole leadership meeting. And what I'll do then is each principal will have a template of, kind of like Darren just did, to go through their building level results and identify the successes, identify the areas for growth, and then, list some ideas for action plans for how we can respond. And I really think our response in the past is what has led to the growth. And again, the growth is tremendous. So Darren, thank you for you and School Perceptions. And I also want to thank Darren because he's not just the typical consultant that just, let's get the survey set up, share the data. Since he has worn the superintendent hat, him and I have had some pretty in-depth discussions too about, what does the data say, and then also what can we do with it, and that's been very helpful.
And that's the rewarding part of doing this work. And then, Joe, if you could just slide back up to the top 5, whoever's, my clicker's not controlling anymore. What happened if you could just go back 1 slide to the, let's see on this or something. But anyway, I just wanted to tell you, when you see your top 5 all in 90s and 80s, sometimes my top 5 per district is 54th percentile, 48th percentile. This is highly unusual in terms of its strength of a report. And I want to put that in context for you because all you know is Menomonie, right? This is one of the finest reports I've given in my 4 years with the company. In fact, so good, the deadline's already passed, but I wanted to ask Joe, and we'll have to talk about this another time because the deadline's passed, if a board member or 2, and he would have been willing to apply to present at the school board convention in January. Because you're a model. You're a model for how to use staff engagement data to maintain a certain work environment and retain your employees. But then they were due a couple weeks ago and we hadn't even finished reporting this out. But that's something to think about.
Next year.
Because, well, think about it. 21% growth score on how the school board is seen. Remarkable. So there's something intentional happening at the board level, and that would be a good story to tell with your peers at the school board convention. So we'll come back to you on that. Okay, outstanding. Thanks for your time tonight. Thanks for your patience with all the numbers.
Really quick question.
You can send a meeting, Abe. I just don't want to.
I noticed there's not any specific question listed about grounds or buildings, but in the comments about facilities and resources, which I was looking at because of the technology question, there is some commentary about like the buildings being kind of old and need of upgrades. Is there a way to figure out some data about, well, you probably know from Kevin, but like where's the concern from staff about the physical resources?
Yes.
Yeah, I think that would be another, mechanism. It wouldn't be this survey, but yeah, certainly in the comment analysis, which you all received, there are some things that aren't being identified there.
And I'll remind you, all these are standard questions. That's how we have the comparisons to hundreds of other districts. And again, you're compared to districts like you. We have way more than that, but we want to compare you to Wisconsin districts, this area, et cetera. But we can customize any questions. So as our relationship continues, if there's a seasonal question, something that came up, we can customize questions any way you want to gather local database because you're worried about that time at the board level, top down. But these are just our standard questions, okay?
Amy, did you have a question?
Yes, I don't want to be a downer, but first of all, I'd like to say that overall it's really good, but then I was looking at the comments, or the summary of the comments, and the areas that are strengths are really good, but there seems to be a little bit of a theme, and I think Amy kind of brought it up about the some of the stuff, but I see kind consistency and workload seem to be things like teachers feeling overwhelmed and that kind of thing. And so those are some things that we could probably improve on too, but just like everybody said, we're always improving, always trying to make things better. But I just wanted to point that out. Thank you.
Darren, I'm glad there were some questions about the comment report. Could you explain just a little bit, like how reflective the comment report is of the overall results?
So there's a day where we would just have an Excel spreadsheet of all the comments, and districts would request them or not request them, depending on how seriously they wanted to take the comments. We always say start with the data, because that's everybody. And the comments, and I joke with the staff, I gathered comments during our reopening COVID survey, and I've never been quite the same since reading those comments, but that's another conversation for another time. But our head programmer that I alluded to before set up a system in our server where all the Menomonie comments can be sorted by frequency. So when we said, what are the district's strengths? Right there you have in front of you the most frequently commented on strengths. It's not that we don't want to value every comment, but we can't take action on every comment when there's hundreds of them. So for Joe, he's got the 12 most commonly commented on topics or themes. But to that end, we also are always trying to get better. So we ask the question, what are some areas the district needs to improve in? To your point, I can't see your name. Amy, thanks for bringing that up. There's definitely something there because we're never done. And Joe said this in front of the whole group this morning. We're never done getting better, and we're not going to rest on our laurels. So there are some themes there. But I would also tell you, down the list, the cutoff was around 8. So that could be 8 people saying that too. So we're trying to honor it, but when you have 268 people taking the survey, it's not a big percentage, but the frequency setting in our software pulled it out as something that more than 1 or 2 commented down. It's in that 8 or higher range, okay? The higher ones are in the 20s. So the top, and they're by frequency. So the higher on the list, the more frequently commented on to the lower, okay? But food for thought.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Thanks for bringing it up. Some boards never even asked me about the comments, and so I'm glad that just shows how plugged in and engaged you are. So that's good stuff. Going once.
Does anyone else have any questions or discussion? Including but not limited to Dale. Do you have something to say?
I
was just going to say, I know it's kind of like what you're saying, that some of those things that seem to be negative comments scored very high on the ranking. And so
because it's not everybody. And I told the staff this morning, because you did have an employee say, what about the comments? And I explained. And I also picked on myself. I said my first 3 years, particularly the first year or two after Act 10, I tried to chase every complaint about me. And I had sleepless nights and was like I said, very brown haired at the time. And the reality is there's only so much you can do in trying to change an entire system. So you have to go by themes, you have to go by broader areas that touch as many people as possible, because you chase every complaint, you're gonna, what's the old saying, if you try to please everybody, you're gonna please nobody.
At the same time, though, we're not dismissing the comments at all, not whatsoever.
No, I'm not saying that. That's why the frequency report was created, is because that's more than just one-offs.
Looping back to the PD question in those comments of areas for improvement, I noticed it says, this is from a summary of course, but it says content-specific training that includes non-teaching staff. So that might inform how we approach the PD question.
You bet.
Any other questions or discussion? Thank you so much for being
Yeah,
here.
it's a pleasure working with Menomonie. Joe does a great job. He knows exactly what he wants and where he wants to focus things. So this is a well-oiled machine. You should be very proud to be part of the process with you. So thank you.
Thanks, Darren. You can leave the clicker with Sam. Or if you didn't already. Okay, thanks. Don't want to go chasing down my clicker.
No. I'm one of my own. So
Drive safe. Drive safe.
Yeah, you bet. Go Brewers.
Oh.
But don't start that.
I'm kidding.
All right, next up, we have a review of the 2025 state assessment report.
So, Brian, thank you for putting this together. Go ahead and you can present it to the board.
All right, well, thank you. This is an annual report that we come in and report on. I do want to point out that there was a slightly updated version. Thank you to a couple of questions that cropped up today that was posted this afternoon. So if you didn't look at this, since this afternoon, and I'll make note of that when I get to one of the economically disadvantaged charts later on. It's not my intent to go through every single chart in the background. Just a real quick review of what this report tells us. It's a report on last spring's state level assessments that students in grades 3 through 11 took. Regardless of what grade they were in, all of those grades take a state level assessment. All students either take the Wisconsin Forward exam for their grade levels, the pre-CT or ACT assessment at the high school, and roughly 1% or less of our students may take an alternative assessment referred to as a dynamic learning assessment. The content areas that are assessed are English language arts, math, and then in grades 4, 8, and 10, this includes social studies, and in grades 4, 8, and then 9 through 11, it would include science as part of the ACT suite of assessments. While I'm excited to share the information, which is very positive information on this assessment, I'm looking forward more so to a report I'm going to give in November on our state report cards, because the state report cards reports out on multiple years worth of data as well as besides just the state assessment. So that's the quick background. So now on to the good news. When we take a look at all grade levels combined across all 4 of those content areas, our students in the district performed at a higher level of proficiency last spring than they did the prior spring. So that's in all 4 of those categories. Now, are there individual grade levels by building or throughout the district where they may not have performed as high as they did prior? Yes, and that's generally the case. But the overall data picture improved in our district last spring compared to the prior year. And we can compare those 2 years because the assessment themselves did not change. A couple of things to point out as far as highlights. In addition to taking a look at that, overall, when we take a look at those same areas, in relation to the state comparable, our students outperformed the state of Wisconsin. So I think that's an important piece because that has not always been the case. And then we take a look at the different assessment areas. In the beginning of the background, when we look at our data picture, we can see that in the area of English language arts, we're 4.87 points above the state. In the area of math, 4.79 points above the state. In science, 2.02 points above the state. And in social studies, 5.63. With the exception of science, almost points above the state comparable in each of those areas, which is definitely significant. Another area to point out, we take a look in the background information and we go to the different demographic groups. This is an area that I think is important for us to take a look at. When we look at our students with or without disabilities, our English language learning students, as well as our economically disadvantaged students, it's an area that we want to take a look at and see not only how do our students compare in relation to each other, but their peers across the state in similar categories. So I'm going to start with students with disabilities. In Menomonie, our students identified with disability would be 16.9% of our student population. In the state, by comparison, it's just over 15%. We see that in the areas of math, science, and social studies, our students performed above their peers across the state. So nice gains there. When we take a look at our students experiencing poverty or identified as economically disadvantaged, in our district, that makes up just over 41% of our student population. The state, by comparison, it's about 40% of all students. And in every grade level tested range, our students who are identified as economically disadvantaged outperform their state level peers. That historically has not always been the case. So that is a huge celebration in our district. And then when we take a look at our English language learners in our district, our students in that category make up 4.7% of our student population. In the state, it's right around 6.9, so just under 7%. When we take a look at grades 3 through 10, English language arts, 3 through 10 math, all grade levels tested in science and all grade levels tested in social studies, our students outperform their state counterparts. So again, I'm happy to answer any specific questions that anybody has, but a real quick high-level overview of some nice gains that we're seeing throughout the district on the state level assessment. It is just simply a comparison from last year to this year. When we get to our report cards, which are currently scheduled to be released publicly on November 11th, so we'll be able to talk about that publicly at that following meeting. We're going to be able to talk about a lot of gains over multiple years and other categories as well. So at this point, I take any questions.
I have a question about how this data is used when you kind of plan out either curriculum changes or other things. Because we have a cycle of going through each subject every year, this cascade of which subject is revised each year and so on. And I guess, well, it doesn't really matter which one I look at, but I'm curious, like, if we look at the ELA proficiency grade 6 to 8, right? Like, there's this huge increase, especially versus the state. And so, like, if we say, okay, we saw this increase, what's your process for then saying, well, do we know why that happened? What year was a change made on which students and how they moved through the cohort? Like, how do you do that feedback loop?
Yep, so that's a great question. So our program review process, we start with a SWOT analysis where we're taking a look at strengths and then opportunities for improvement. And a review of the historical data is part of that. We take a look and see, I met with social studies this afternoon, for example, and they have not yet dug deeply into this information specific as part of their program review process. But as we start to identify areas that we do well in or areas that we can improve upon, a review of our state assessment data is part of that. But then we also take a look at when did we make changes to resources and did we see corresponding changes to student performance on state assessments associated with that, or we also will take a look and sometimes how we're doing on state assessments may prompt that conversation where we take a look at resources, where we take a look at training, professional development, things like that. So it helps inform the process. It doesn't ever make the decision. That helps inform that process, even to the point where our departments are very interested in not only the data as a whole, but as we take a look at how different subgroups of our student populations are doing. Several years ago when we were looking at math, for example, we spent a fair amount of time taking a look at how our students from these three different categories, our subgroup categories, particularly EL students, was an area that we dug into quite a bit at that point in time.
If I could just add as well, this is only one piece of the pie, and the district level program reviews is only one piece. With our PLCs in our different departments, along with our academic coaches, and Brian, of course, there is constant review of student performance. This is certainly one of the big pieces of it, but it is only a piece.
Yeah, exactly. I'm kind of trying to get at how those fit together. That's a huge question. But I just noticed this kind of funny little wiggle in the graph, right, where on the ELA, so I look at grades 3 to 5, like the last year segment kind of goes level or down a little bit, but then the grade 6 to 8 goes up quite a bit. And that same thing happens, I think, in the math one. Grades 3 to 5 kind of levels off. Grades 6 to 8 goes up quite a bit. It's like, that's kind of funny that we have, a couple of grade levels apart, a different trend happening. Can we roll back and say, did we make a decision, 3 years ago, 5 years ago, when these students were in K1 that has now had an impact? So I'm just kind of curious about how that, what the actual mechanism is for kind of looking back at notes and what changes were made, because sometimes things kind of flow with culture over time.
Yep. And the other thing that I'll add is for the purposes of this report, we're grouping multiple grade levels that becomes a rolling cohort. So we're always gaining and losing a grade level in that. But what you're talking about, not only do we do by the grade level ranges across the district, but then we look at that by individual grade level. And, you know, we definitely will see a trend with a particular grade level cohort as they work their way through. And then we also, at the building level, they will take a look at their individual building grade level data in relation to the district as a whole and see, you know, does that grade level in that building match the district grade level norm, and how does that compare to the state as well for that grade level? So definitely a much more granular level at that point.
On the granular point, like, so this is like a snapshot of each kind of multi-year cohort, right? I am kind of curious about that idea of like, is there not in this report, but is there a mechanism for like taking a sample of students and following them to see how that individual cohort, move through the performance over time, instead of like this is third grade, right?
Yep. And we do that. And also in relation to student transitional grades from elementary to middle to high school, as the teams within those buildings at those transitional points will take a look at, what are the unique needs of this group of students transitioning between levels and how do we best support that. High school, for example, was having a conversation today about some needs that they're seeing with one particular cohort, working their way through things. They saw some positive gains for last year, as they went into this school year. How did they make some adjustments, for providing those types of supports at the next grade level when, the last few years they haven't had to provide those supports and things like that. Yeah. Thank you.
I have two questions. Sorry. This first one's a quick one, I think. The very final graph on here, that talks about our ELL
Yes.
kids, or English language kids. Grade 11 for math and ELA doesn't have the STMA green. Is that because the cohort's too small?
It's because in that particular case, I would have to look and see whether or not the cohort was too small or we did not have enough students in that particular category that scored at the proficient level. Sometimes we will have a case where there's enough in the cohort to report on, but they didn't perform at proficient. So I would have to look back and see which one of those two was the case.
Okay, that makes sense.
Yep.
And then I'm just wondering, with your lens and you seeing this, plus other secrets we don't know yet, what are your big, how are you feeling overarchingly about all of this?
So I feel really good not only about this data that we've seen because, as we look back the last couple of years and as the board is well aware, we had identified some areas that we need on continuous improvement efforts. And not that we don't always do that, but the information that's presented here is a very strong indicator that we're going to continue to see positive results as an outcome of that work that's been done at each of the levels. I'm really looking forward to our meeting in November.
With that in mind, depending on that November report card, I think these improvements, I know a lot of nonprofits really set goals based on improvements like this and reward their staff accordingly. And I think that we need to pay attention to that and be thinking about this down the road. And if we want to maintain this high quality staff that's doing this good job, and if we want to continue these improvements, I think we need to address some rewards for that.
That's a great point, Dale. Thanks for bringing it up. I just had a quick question looking at the graphs, and I realize some of these are kind of hard to get very specific information from, and I realize that's not the point. And I also realize we'll get a lot more detail on a lot of these things from the state report cards. But when I look at the demographic maps, or graphs at the bottom, the last three, There's a couple of places, and I guess I'm looking specifically at the students with disabilities graph, where it looks like in many cases the gap in Menomonie between students without disabilities and students with disabilities is larger than the gap of the state average. And it's not universally the case, but there's a few places where it is, and I'm wondering, I'm noticing that, I guess. I wonder what you think about it.
Sure. And a couple of things. Yes, in some cases, our gap is larger than the state. Pick a particular grade level or grade level range. In some cases, that's not the case. Again, you're recognizing that this is based off of 1 year's worth of data over multiple cohorts. So as we look at that, but what this tells us is there are some areas that we've prioritized as a district to be working on, our inclusionary practices in the specific area of students with disabilities. And Tonya and her team have done a lot of work on shifting some practices over the years and having conversations. That's hard work and that takes time. And what this doesn't show is it doesn't show growth over time that is happening. So in some cases, we'll see that there's a gap that's present, but that gap is closing. And that's one thing I don't like about just looking at 1 year's worth of data, is it doesn't really show us some of those gap closure items. Our state report cards will do a nice job of exhibiting some of that. But it also helps to reaffirm when the work is hard, that we need to continue to do that hard work. When we look at this, we're seeing some very nice gains across all of those demographic groups, and students with disabilities is right there. And we're also able to show some of the areas where, with other subgroups, we've made,
Thank you for that.
Question on the cut scores. So is there an idea of how we can better share this information with the wider community and understanding of why the cut scores were made? And do you know what I'm saying? So
Sure.
How we can present that to folks that say,
there is some, there is some, or some resources available that the Department of Public Instruction has put together that we've taken a look at. If there's a desire to widely share about individual assessments, kind of the reasoning behind, we can pull some of that together. In general, what the state of Wisconsin has put together and the changes on the forward and pre-ACT and ACT assessment was to better align Wisconsin's cut scores with those across the nation. So historically, Wisconsin has had very high expectations, which, from my standpoint, isn't a bad thing. At the same time, there's not universal application of what that looks like across all 50 states. So Wisconsin did go through a process, adjusted those scores or cut scores, and when we talk about that, we're talking about the thresholds for proficiency levels, to bring them more in alignment with the majority of states.
Any additional questions or discussion on these data assessments? All right, moving on. I think keep Brian in the hot seat for a couple more items. Next up, we have our building school learning objectives report.
All right, so this is another annual report, and it kind of seems like old news at this point for us because our buildings are approaching the end of the first quarter or the midpoint of our first trimester. But on an annual basis, each of our buildings will go through a process where they set goals for the upcoming school year and also report out on their goals from the prior year. So our student learning objective report. What we did last year was we made a change to how we present that information to you, the board, and put it in more of a dashboard approach so that you can look at it quickly. So as you scroll through the attachment, you'll see that each of our buildings, for the most part, has a literacy and math and some type of a student behavior goal. It starts with the previous year's goals being listed out and whether or not they met the goal, were near the goal, or had not met the goal. So goal met, goal partially met, goal not met. And as you scroll through, you can see across our elementary, for the most part, goals were met or were partially met for last school year. And then when we get into the middle school, with the exception of one goal not being met last school year, and then several being partially met or met. And then at the high school, as part of their ongoing continuous improvement process, in my estimation, has set some very ambitious goals.
Hey, Brian.
Yes.
Sorry to interrupt you. Can you pause just for a second? Does anybody else, did their network go out? Yeah, something just happened in the network. What's that? Oh, that page? Okay. Sorry, I think we better address this real quick so people can listen and pay attention.
Yeah.
It's just with the report docs that it's saying pages can't be found. I can do other Google searches.
So board docs went down? Okay. All right, well, yeah, board docs went down. Right at 7:08. So, maybe I want to make a motion to it. No. The board members have received this report, and Brian, you have it in front of you?
Yes.
Okay, board, Rachel, it's up to you.
Oh, sure. Yeah, I was wondering, is it possible to show it up here for anyone?
Share screen. Just does report directly. Just your report.
The dashboard.
Yeah.
Oh, I just don't have access to it right now.
Okay. Hang on, I can share it another way.
Board docs is back working.
Yeah. Okay. Okay.
What was it, 6 or 7 years ago, it seemed like board docs was updated to run Monday nights. So we ran into
Oh,
this.
got it. Yep.
Is that what, okay, you're getting that?
Is everybody back? Okay.
I'm listening.
Okay, great, go ahead.
Yeah, if you want to resume your spiel, and hopefully by the time you get to questions, everyone will see it.
So where I left off when board docs went down, so high school, has set some, I would say, very ambitious goals, and take a look at their report when that comes up. Each of their goals were identified as partially met, and they're continuing with those goals as part of their continuous improvement process. So, as far as the goals themselves, we continue to make really good progress on those goals. A change that was made this year at the elementary level, and really it came as an outcome of the work that was done in Act 20, but it's not limited to early literacy. They took a very similar approach for K-5 literacy and K-5 math with their goals this year. All 4 of our elementary sites have shared goals this year as opposed to setting up individual building goals for literacy and math, using very similar measures for them. Their action plans are unique to their buildings, and then they retained their individual behavior goals based off of needs there. Middle school went through a very similar process, but utilizing some different measurement tools and are setting their goals. And because the high school had identified partially achieved goals last year, are continuing largely with the continuation of last year's goals. So, they're there for you to be able to see what each building is working on. They have plans in place throughout the course of the school year based on their action plans to review their progress. And then I meet quarterly with building admin as well for monitoring purposes. So with that, happy to ask for any questions.
I did notice when I was looking earlier that some of the goals were lofty. It was kind of exciting to see. I don't remember which ones now.
There's wide kind of improvement increases across the board with a couple exceptions that you alluded to. I'm kind of surprised I see like in social studies, 7th grade, and a couple of 9th grade topics, there's like a double-digit decrease, which seems anomalous to me. Or is there a way to understand that? That's not just kind of noise in the data. So if I look at
middle school, or is that the one you're looking at?
Yeah, like on page 5, it's comprehensive social studies, goal partially met.
Yeah.
And like it seems kind of like odd to see a decrease instead of maybe a minor increase there. And there's a similar thing down a couple pages later on 9th grade math and science.
Yep. So just, I guess a couple of observations, as like the middle school, for example, and high school, as they work through these, I know last year it was a new tool that they were using for their measurement in social studies, and then taking a look at, prior from one year to the next, and again, it's not uncommon as a cohort moves through that we do at times see a dip in their data. And then what that allows is a conversation, kind of like what we were talking about in the prior report. Was there something that occurred? Was there a change in practice? Was it a change in the tool? Did they change, when they, administer a measure?
In particular, that comprehension and social studies item, right? It was like 6th grade increase, 7th grade decrease, 8th grade increase by large amounts. That does suggest there's some sort of blip happening over years, over.
And what it allows us to also do is to take a look and see, did we try something new with the approach to instruction at that point in time? As we were going through, we like to, observe every time we make a tweak that we see improvement, but, sometimes that doesn't happen and it results in a change in practice.
Thanks.
I just wanted to say I really appreciate this format. It's easy to read. It's nice to be able to track. And I think it was maybe last year or the year before when we saw this report, we were talking about those goals partially met. Like, I really appreciate the level of detail in knowing, like, okay, we met this part of it and not this part, and here's how far we were off by. Like, that's really useful information versus like yes or no. Any additional questions or discussion about our building student learning objective reports? Do we feel okay about moving on, and folks could reach out to Brian reviewing this later? They have additional questions for Clintons you aren't able to see right now. Is that okay? Or do we want to wait until everyone's got the document back up?
It won't even load the login page for me, so
All right.
I don't think it's.
Okay, so I guess what I suggest is we move on to the next item, and folks can follow up directly with Brian and Joe if they have questions. And also knowing this will continue to come before us as we talk about the state report cards next month. Is that all? Does that sound okay? All right, great. Then, next up, we have our review early college credit requests for spring of 2026. And that's you.
Yeah, this is a standard report that the board receives. Was it twice a year, Brian?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep.
Anything specific this year that you want to point out?
The only thing that I'll point out is if you did open up, and as you look at just the narrative, you'll notice that the requests for spring are down slightly from some prior years, as well as the number of students that are also requesting early college credit and Start College Now courses. What we're noticing through our increase in partnerships with dual enrollment courses offered in-house, we're starting to see a slight decrease in the number of students that are requesting some courses directly at CBTC or Stout. And we attribute that to those needs being met in-house at the high school as opposed to needing to go off campus.
Would you mind telling me a little bit more about how kids know about this opportunity? How are students aware that this deadline is coming? Or
Yep. So really, what I'll say is Principal Drake and the team at the high school sends out multiple communications throughout the course of the school year as the deadlines are approaching. I know as a parent of a high schooler, I receive those communications ahead of the school year and as those deadlines approach. In addition, one of the things that was layered in a few years ago as part of the high school registration process, when students enroll for courses for the next school year, if they sign up for a course that ultimately ends up not being offered, staff in the school counseling office also will reach out to students and let them know that their course may not be running, and if there are opportunities to enroll or apply for courses at STEM.
And actually, we had, this was a kind of a big issue, again, 6-7 years pre-COVID. And I know Mr. Drake has really emphasized the communication on this. Casey, I know Brian just covered, is there anything else you want to add about how this is communicated out for these course options?
No, not really. We communicate out through Parent Square this year, or Skylar in the past couple of years. It's in our announcements at school a few times. We also have grade level meetings where it's mentioned, and then our counseling staff does a nice job of including it within our grade level Google Classrooms that each grade level has. So the kids get it a few different ways throughout that. It's up on our TVs that are in the commons area, like as a slide. So they're eating lunch, going through that, whatever. They just have those reminders available.
And I do know, like Brian said, that from a parent perspective, the Parent Square email is really the kind of the big one for the parents. Also, the high school announcement, I know a lot of the parents follow the high school announcements, and it's in there as well.
I always enjoy reading this list. Any additional questions or discussion on the early college credit requests? All right. Then, next up we have the final budget revisions. Do you have printouts of that?
I do, and again, the board members receive these, and Eric, is your computer working correctly?
So far, yeah.
Okay, so you can see them. It's just one copy, Rachel.
Oh, I'm sorry, it looks like. So anybody not here? No. Do you need this?
Yeah.
Okay.
Oh, it's coming up now.
I think we're good. Because again, the board already received these, and this is a standard report in the fall. What it is after the audit is done, really there's no legal requirement to do this. However, doing it makes sure that the books end up aligning with the audit. So Eric, could you maybe just summarize some of the final budget revisions, please?
Yeah, so the main reason for the revision is the 3.5 million transfer to Fund 46 that I mentioned earlier. And I figured since, that item was being revised, it made sense to also bring the rest of the budget in line with the actual revenues and expenses from last year. So that's why you see quite a few items adjusted, but most of it is just cleanup entries to make sure the budget accurately matches what had actually occurred in the 24-25 school year. So I present this at this time, and then next time it's approved.
it. It's very easy to read, and I appreciate that.
Definitely easy to
I want to say thanks for putting this report together. Most of these are things that track with some stuff we already knew, or could have known, at least. And so but it's nice to see it all sort of condensed here and have this information. So I really appreciate the effort that went into this.
Thank you.
Does anyone have questions or discussion on the final budget revisions?
And they will come back to the board at the next meeting, so if you do review this more and you have questions, please just shoot them to me and I'll talk with Eric about them and we'll be able to answer them for the whole board at the next meeting.
All right, next up, we have the 2025-26 budget timeline.
So this is also an informational item, and board members, you've already seen this timeline. This just goes through the cycle that we follow in terms of building the budget. The reason why Eric and I wanted to bring this forward today is because at the next meeting, that's one of the biggest budget meetings that the board has each year. We had the annual meeting in August, but if you recall, at the annual meeting, there are so many data points that are unknown. We don't have our third Friday September count, we don't have our state aid certification, overall property valuation for the school district. All of that stuff gets reported, and Eric has been really busy developing the final budget. Eric, is there anything you want to preview with the board before we, bring it back at the next meeting for their consideration?
So, the only thing, on Wednesday, the state announces the equalization aid, which will be one of the final pieces that determines the levy. And again, statewide, a lot of mill rates are anticipated to go up, just because, there's an extra revenue limit for each student, but the state in their last budget said, there won't be an increase in the equalization aid to compensate for that. So across the state, they're anticipating higher mill rate.
And the superintendents from all across the state have been communicating about this, and it will be important in the messaging. And we did talk about it at the annual meeting, but it's going to become real for people when they see their tax bills. And really, what Eric just summed it up really well. I think every other year that I can remember that there was a revenue limit increase. There weren't always revenue limit increases, but when there were revenue limit increases, there was also an increase in the state equalization aid, so that revenue limit increase did not go on the local property tax levy. However, the way that the budget was handled down in Madison, for some reason that did not happen this time. So there is a revenue limit increase, but it will be going on the local levy, at least for the first year. I continue to talk with our state legislators about what that means. I don't think it's going to have as big of an impact in Menomonie as it will in some other school districts. At the same time, it is very concerning to us. So we will have that all prepared for the board for next meeting. But if anybody has any questions, we'd be happy to try to answer them.
Questions on the budget timeline? Sounds like that will be a big discussion next time. All right, next up we have discussion of our 2026 health insurance renewal.
So we have some really good news about our health insurance renewal. And I really appreciate the work that Sam and Eric, Dale, and our health insurance committee have done. You all know that we had, I think it was 6 years in a row, where we did not have an increase to our health insurance premiums. However, as inflation took off and as things changed with our group, we had a few years in a row where it was pretty sticky. In fact, in one case, we were just happy to have a bid for our health insurance program. We are self-funded, but we do have a reinsurance program for individual claims that go above $130,000. The good news is that with the plan designs that we've had, along with our staff being very good consumers, our health insurance fund is now back to where it needs to be. It's very stable, and with that, as we look to our budget for next year for our health insurance fund, we are able to recommend a 0% renewal in the health insurance. So that means that we would not have premiums increase for our 2026 renewal. If you remember, our health insurance plan goes from January 1st through the calendar year. So we will be having an open enrollment period during the month of November. And then based on how that open enrollment period goes, we will then set our final budget for the health insurance. We are working with the insurance center, and we are looking at also developing an incentive program to continue having our staff be terrific consumers of our health insurance plan. And we look forward to engaging the health medical committee meeting, or health medical committee at their upcoming meeting. Sam, is that next week?
The 23rd.
The 23rd. So we will be bringing this back to the board. We'll be asking you to approve a 0% renewal. And then once the renewal is done, we plan to bring an incentive program for the health insurance at a later time after the renewal is complete. I would love to see the incentive program be put in the month of December, but we'll just have to see what kind of feedback we get from the committee. Any questions on health insurance?
You mentioned no changes to the plan design, and I just want to clarify, I think that also means that the district's contributions to the employee HSAs will remain the same as they were last year, is that right?
That's correct. We will not be recommending any changes to the HSA contributions or to the deductibles along with the premiums.
Right, great, so the amount that the district has been giving will continue to give.
Correct.
Great. Any other questions or discussion on the health insurance renewal? Wonderful. And the Health and Medical Committee meets next week, and our representative to that is Dale, right? You've got that on your calendar? Wonderful. All right, moving on. Items related to next meeting dates, board committees, and reports. So the Health and Medical Committee meets on October 23rd. We have a special school board meeting on the 27th. The 28th, there is a WASB regional meeting in Eau Claire. And then we will have just one regular school board meeting in November on the 10th. Before we move on, I guess I just want to ask if there are board members who feel like we did not have enough opportunity to really discuss the SLO reports, or like to see them while Brian was talking about them, and you want to put it on another agenda in the future, I guess follow up afterwards. It was a disjointed process, so I don't want to make sure we get that justice. Unless someone wants to say so right now, but. All right, then we have a closed session on the agenda, so I'd like to suggest we take a 5-minute recess and come back and move into closed session.